In this video lecture, we will be seeing Practice Paper 2, April-May 2022, General Science, Paper 1, Physical Science question paper. This question paper is of 30 marks for Part A and 1 hour 20 minutes are allotted to solve physics paper. Total time is 1 hour 35 minutes for solving both Part A and Part B. Just for solving Part A, you will get 1 hour 20 minutes. So it will consist of 3 sections, 1, 2 and 3. In section 1, 6 questions will be given and they are of 2 marks each, and you can solve any 3 questions. But in today's paper, we will be discussing all the questions without choice so that you can prepare for your board exams. So my suggestion to you is listen to all the questions carefully, learn it, because there is a chance that these questions might come again for the final board exam 2022, which are there in May. So first question is differentiate ohmic and non-ohmic conductors, and whenever you attempt any question, remember that you have to see the marks. By keeping marks in mind, you have to attend those questions. So differentiate ohmic and non-ohmic conductors means I need to make a column. In one side I have to write ohmic conductors and other side I have to write non-ohmic conductors, and I need to say what are the differences between ohmic conductors and non-ohmic conductors. So first of all, ohmic conductors are the conductors which obey Ohm's law. Obey Ohm's law means they follow Ohm's law. What does Ohm's law say us? That V is equals to IR. Voltage is directly proportional to current. That is said by Ohm's law. So the ohmic conductors will obey Ohm's law. And non-ohmic conductors will not obey Ohm's law. They will not obey V is equals to IR. Then second point which we can say for ohmic conductors is the voltage versus current graph of ohmic conductors is a straight line. It means that as the voltage is increasing, current is also increasing for ohmic conductors, whereas for non-ohmic conductors the VI graph is a curve. It is not a straight line. You can see here it is a curve. Means as the voltage is increasing, current will not increase, it will decrease. Okay, so it is a curve for non-ohmic conductors. Then write about examples. What can I say for examples? The examples we can give is metals, because we know voltage and current are there in metals, right? They will allow current to pass through them. Then resistors are an example of ohmic conductors. What about non-ohmic conductors? Example are semiconductors like germanium and silicon, diodes, bulb filament, etc. These are the examples of non-ohmic conductors. Now we know that in ohmic conductors, for ohmic conductors to obey Ohm's law, we need to keep the temperature constant. If the temperature is not constant, it means that Ohm's law will fail. If Ohm's law is failing, means the conductors will become non-ohmic conductors. So we can say that in non-ohmic conductors, the temperature is not constant. That is, the temperature is continuously changing. So for 2 marks, you can write these 4 points for the difference between ohmic conductors and non-ohmic conductors. Let us move to question 2, which is very important. Second question is guess and write period number and group number of the element having atomic number 16. So in this question we have to write period number and group number, and it is given to us that atomic number is 16. So since the atomic number, we indicate atomic number by Z is equals to 16, for writing period number and group number, remember if we write the electronic configuration, we can write period number and group number. Now how to write electronic configuration? With the help of Moller's chart. Remember what is Moller's chart? In the chapter structure of atom, you learned about Moller's chart. That is how you write the electronic configuration. Okay, see, I'll tell you what is Moller's chart, and then I will discuss this answer. This particular diagram which you see here is your Moller's chart, and it's very easy to draw. You can write n is equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Write 1s for 1, 2s, 2p for 2, 3s, 3p, 3d for 3, 4s, 4p, 4d, 4f for 4, 5s, 5p, 5d, 5f for 5, 6s, 6p, 6d for 6, 7s, 7p for 7, and 8s. And then what you can do? You can draw the arrows like this. First it enters the 1s orbital, then it enters 2s orbital, then 2p orbital, then 3s orbital, then 3p orbital, then 4s orbital. So you have to remember this. and it's very easy to draw also. It can come also in exam, draw Moller's chart. So based on this only we will write electronic configuration always for any element. See, first it will enter in 1s, then 2s, as you can see, then 2p, then 3s, then 3p, then 4s. Remember this. And we know that in s maximum electrons can either be 1 or it can be 2. So we will write either s1 or we'll write s2. And for p maximum electrons can be 6, not more than 6. From 1 to 6 it can be any electrons. Okay, remember this. So we'll use this concept for writing the electronic configuration of 20 atomic number. So 20 atomic number means, again I just now showed you how to write. First 1s2, 2s2, 2p6, 3s2, 3p4. Why am I writing 3p4? Because I have to add all the electrons. See here, 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 6 is 10, 10 plus 2 is 12, and 12 plus 4 is 16. Since the atomic number is 16, here I have written 3p4. Not 3p6. Maximum for p is 6 electrons, but here we have written 4 because we had to write 16. Okay, this is how you write the electronic configuration. Now after writing the electronic configuration, for writing the period number, always remember, see the last valence shell or last orbital, which is the last orbital we have here. The last orbital which we have is p here, and here what is it? 3p4 means this value which we see here is called as n. N means the maximum value of n you should see, that is your period number always. So here what is the maximum value of the last orbital p? It is 3, which is there beside p. So that is why period number is 3. Okay, now I gave you already what is the concept of period number. Remember this for any element in exam. If it asks for 17 or for 18 also, you should be able to write the number which is attached beside the orbital is called as period number. How to write group number with the help of atomic number. Remember, one hint I'll give you is group number will be equal to atomic number. So since atomic number is 16 means group number is also of 16. Or if means if you don't want to write with this concept, that is group number is equals to atomic number. Atomic number is given means easily I can write group number as 16 because both will be equal. Atomic number is equals to group number. See this, it is p here, right? So whenever the orbital is p here, for p orbital, here the formula which is used for p orbital is ns plus np plus 10. Means how many electrons are there in ns plus how many electrons are there in np plus 10. Which ns we are talking about? These last two, ns and np, we are talking about. So here how many electrons are there? Electrons are the numbers which are written in powers. Okay, here in powers. So here what are the electrons written for 3s? 2. So 2 for ns, and again for p how many electrons are there? 4. So 2 plus 4 is 6, and you should add plus 10 for p orbitals. The formula is number of electrons in ns plus number of electrons in np plus number of electrons in 10 for p valence shell. That is if the electron are entering in p. So you'll get 16. That is how you find out the group number. Okay. Draw a neat diagram of reverberatory furnace and label it. Now this reverberatory furnace is in your chapter Principles of Metallurgy in your textbook. So I will directly show you how to draw it, and it is very scoring and very easy to draw. And you need to label it also. Label it means you have to write the names of the parts. See, it is on page number 250 of your textbook. Mark it and practice it. Figure 7. So how are you going to draw? This is my diagram of reverberatory furnace. Draw it as it is. Okay, we can see. Draw it as it is. It is very easy, see, and you just need to mark the arrows, right, like this. This is my reverberatory furnace. So what is the labeling you can see here? First of all, we have a firebox. This is my firebox. From the firebox, heat will be released, the gas will be released, and it will pass through the hearth, which you can see here, HERTH, hearth, and you have to put some dots here. It is going, and then finally we'll get ore from this passage. So how many parts are there here? 3 parts are there. Firebox, hearth, and ore, and also arrows are there. This is my reverberatory furnace. If you draw this, you will get 2 marks. Write Lensmaker's formula and explain the terms in it. See, you can either get a problem based on Lensmaker's formula, okay, or you can get a question in which it asks you the formula. So you should be prepared for both. So first let us see what is the Lensmaker's formula. Here it is telling means write Lensmaker's formula, and also I should explain what are the terms in it. Means suppose if I have any variable, means what is that variable, that also I should explain, that it is telling. This is my Lensmaker's formula. 1 by f is equals to n minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. What is f here? F is focal length, n is refractive index of the medium, R1 is radius of first curvature and R2 is radius of second curvature. So only 4 terms are there, F, N, R1 and R2. Remember this formula. 1 by F is equals to N minus 1 into 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. This is my lens maker's formula. Okay. Write the materials required for the reaction of acid with carbonate. It means that it will ask materials required in activity. What materials will be required for performing the activity of acid with carbonate? That you have to say. Here it just said material, but actually it should be materials. So whatever materials you know which are required when acid reacts with carbonate, that activity you know, right? That you should write. Okay, I have a playlist also in which I had explained this activity. You can watch that, and if anything comes an exam from that, materials required or procedure, you can write, or I'll show you the materials required now. See, these are the materials required for passing of acid. Whenever acid reacts with metal carbonate, we require these materials. What are the materials required? You should write like this. First of all, we require a stand. Okay, we require a cork. This is called as cork. We require a Thystel funnel. Okay, then we require a test tube. And for acid, we require dilute hydrochloric acid, that is HCl. And for metal carbonate, we require Na2CO3, that is called as sodium carbonate. Okay, so these are the materials which are required for performing activity for acid with metal carbonate. Stand, cork, dilute hydrochloric acid, test tube and sodium carbonate. See, carbon dioxide and calcium hydroxide which you see here, these are not the materials required. These are obtained afterwards in a solution. Here it is asking just the materials required for reaction of acid with metal carbonate. So for performing this activity, which materials are required, those only you have to write. Moving to sixth question, balance the chemical equations NaOH plus Zn giving rise to Na2ZnO2 plus H2. Okay, in this question, first, always whenever balancing questions comes, I'll give you an easy method how to balance. Write the element name LHS, RHS. Write what are the elements here, Na, O, H and Zn are there. So here in this question, if you observe, you should write number of elements on left hand side, that is LHS, and number of elements on right hand side, RHS. How many atoms are there on sodium on LHS side? If you observe here, the number of atoms on LHS for sodium is 1, and for number of atoms of on RHS side are how many? They are 2 here, you can see. So 2 we have written. Similarly for oxygen, 1 is there. Here for oxygen 2 are there, so write 2. Remember this 2 which is there below, it belongs only to oxygen, not to other elements. If it comes beside means it belongs to all the 3, but if it comes below means it belongs only to that element. Hydrogen again 1. Here how many hydrogens are there? On RHS we have 2 hydrogens. Zinc 1, and here also zinc is 1 only, because here we don't have any atom which is attached to zinc below, right? Here only we should see number is 1. So now in order to balance, remember the left hand side and the right hand side of both the atoms should be same. Means if these all 3 are 2 means these all also I should make as 2. Then only it will be balanced. So first, whenever we balance any chemical equation, we need to balance metals. Okay, already zinc is balanced, 1 is equals to 1. So go to sodium, because sodium is a metal. Oxygen and hydrogen are non-metals, but sodium is a metal. So first balance sodium. How can I balance sodium here? If I multiply this with 2, 1 2s are 2. LHS I will have 2 atoms of sodium. RHS also I will have 2 atoms of sodium, this. So both will be balanced. So what I'll do is, again I'll draw the table and write element LHS, RHS, NaOH, zinc. Now multiply with 2. I'll get 2 here on LHS and RHS. Now write the reaction. Whenever you add 2, remember it will be beside. You cannot add below. You should add beside. Okay. So if I add here 2, you can see that the number of atoms on oxygen also will become 2, because this 2 belongs to sodium, this 2 belongs to oxygen, and this 2 belongs to hydrogen. And number of atoms on hydrogen will also be 2. So see 2, 2, 2, and already 1 was there on zinc and 1 was there on zinc here. So we see here that all the atoms are getting balanced. So here we can say that A bit is balanced, that is first bit is balanced here. The reaction is balanced. What is a balanced reaction we have got? This is my balanced reaction. Okay, you should write this balanced reaction. The question is balance Na plus H2O giving rise to NaOH plus H2. Na plus H2O giving rise to NaOH plus H2. Write the elements NaHO. Write number of atoms on LHS and RHS. This is known as LHS, this is known as RHS, as we know. So here, how many atoms are there for sodium Na? One atom is there, so write down 1. Here also one atom of Na. Here 2 atoms of hydrogen. Here 1 atom of hydrogen and 2 atoms of hydrogen. That is on RHS, 1 plus 2 atoms of H are there. Then oxygen is 1 atom of oxygen here before H2O and 1 atom of oxygen before NaOH. So we see here that hydrogen is not balanced. Here we have 2 atoms of hydrogen and here we have 1 plus 2, that is 3 atoms of hydrogen. So we need to balance hydrogen. How to balance hydrogen? This 1 we can multiply 2. So again draw the table, write down the same steps. Element, sodium, hydrogen, oxygen, number of atoms on LHS and RHS. Already on sodium, 1 atom on LHS and 1 atom on RHS. Now, what is the change here? Only the change is we are multiplying with 1, 2 on hydrogen side. That is on RHS, we are going to multiply 2 here. So, where I should write this 2? I should write before NaOH. I cannot write below. Remember this. So, when I multiply this 2 with 1, it becomes 2 plus 2, that is 4. So, here I'll have Na plus H2. Now, I have written 2 here. NaOH plus H2. Now, if we consider here again on LHS, how many sodiums I have? 1 sodium. But on RHS, I have 2 sodiums. What about hydrogen? 2 hydrogens, okay, on LHS and 2 hydrogens on RHS. Plus 2 hydrogens on RHS. That is here totally we have how many hydrogens? 2 plus 2. That is 4 hydrogens. But here we are having only 2 hydrogens on LHS. So what can we do? We should multiply this with 2 on hydrogen side. When I multiply with this with 2, here I will multiply because I told you that you should write it before the element. So I should write 2 here, right? So this 2 belongs to H2 as well as this 2 belongs to O. So oxygen will also become 2, means now we can see that and number of atoms on hydrogen and oxygen will be balanced. And first this is becoming balanced, hydrogen and oxygen, because 4 on LHS and 4 on RHS, 2 on LHS and 2 on RHS for oxygen and hydrogen. Now what is remaining? This is remaining. What you can do here? Multiply it with 2. So write 2 Na here. So what is my balanced reaction? 2 Na plus H2O giving rise to 2 NaOH plus H2. This is my balanced equation. Hope you have understood balancing. If you have any doubt in balancing, you can see my videos on balancing. It is in the playlist of chemical reactions chapter, in which I have explained in very detail about balancing. Here we have section 2. Section 2 consists of 4 questions. Out of those 4 questions, you need to do any 2. But as I said you, in this we will discuss all the questions so that you will get a practice and you can learn and prepare. 7th question is explain Hund's rule with an example. So you need to state what is Hund's rule. You need to explain it with the help of an example. It is from the chapter Structure of Atom. So first write the heading Hund's rule. According to this rule, electron pairing in orbitals starts only when all available empty orbitals of the same energy, that is the orbitals which are empty and which have the same energy, those are called as degenerate orbitals. When they are singly occupied, then only the electrons will be paired in the orbits. That is the meaning of this Hund's rule. Okay, I'll say once again. That is, here it says that we need to pair electrons in the orbitals, right? These which you see here, these are known as orbitals, right? So electrons will enter these orbitals only when the orbitals of the same energy are singly occupied first. Orbitals of the same energy means, for example, we have 2p. In 2p, how many we have? 3 boxes we have, you know this. So first, since it is 2p2, here I have 1 electron in 2p and another electron again in 2p. But actually, what should have been the case? It should be like this, right? 2p2 is there. First, this box should get filled and then it should enter this orbital. But according to Hund's rule, it says that if there are some orbitals left which are empty, then you need to fill that first. That is why we first fill this. It is singly occupied. Okay, and then this is also singly occupied. So, see, I'll give you an example. That is, it means that in a sub-level, each orbital is single occupied before it is doubly occupied. See, first it is singly occupied now. one box is filling with one electron. Again, one box is filling with one electron for 2p. So consider carbon, for example, atomic number is 6. For filling the empty orbitals, we need to write the electronic configuration. How do you get to know this electronic configuration? I told you just now with the help of Moller's chart. What is electronic configuration? 1s2, 2s2, 2p2. So here we see that the first 4 electrons, how many electrons are there? 2. The powers are known as electrons here, 2 plus 2, 4. These first 4 electrons, they go into the 1s orbital and 2s orbital. And then how many electrons are remaining? 2 electrons are remaining. They go into the separate 2p orbitals as we can see here. So in S, remember the maximum capacity for storing is 2 electrons only. So, and S will have only one subshell. Okay, so this is my subshell of S electron, but as it is 1s2, both the electrons are getting filled. Then we have 2s2, so both the electrons will get filled. Now what about 2p2? Here in case of p, remember it has 3 orbitals. It has 3 separate shapes we have. Remember x-axis, y-axis and z-axis. But here it is 2. Here we will not write both of them in the same box first. Okay, what it will do? It will enter into orbitals separately according to Hund's rule. That is the meaning of Hund's rule. I'll give you one more example and explain. Take nitrogen. This is for carbon, atomic number is 6. Take for example nitrogen. Nitrogen atomic number is 7. Write the electron pairing according to Hund's rule. We will write C. The electronic configuration of nitrogen will be 1s2, 2s2, 2p3. Why? Because 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 plus 3 is 7. So S is singly occupied, 2 electrons. Again S is singly occupied, 2 electrons. Okay, then 2p3 we have 3 orbitals. In this, 1 will be filled, then 1 will be filled, then 1 will be filled. That is, it will not leave any orbitals empty. That is the meaning of this Hund's rule. See, do we have any orbital which is remaining empty? No. In each orbital, 1 electron is occupying. That is the meaning of Hund's rule. Question 8. Explain the froth flotation process which is mainly useful for concentration of sulfide ores. See, what is froth flotation process? It comes under principles of metallurgy. Okay, and it is useful for the concentration of sulfide ores. We need to explain that answer. Okay, about this method. This diagram you have in your textbook, right? In this diagram, for concentration of ore, we use 4 methods. We know hand picking, washing, froth flotation and magnetic separation. So froth flotation is the method by which the ore is concentrated. Okay, that is the second step. Okay, in principles of metallurgy, concentration of ore by froth flotation. That we have to explain. Since it is a 4 marks question, you also need to draw the diagram. This is the diagram, okay, which is there in your textbook of TS-SCERT. First, I'll explain you the steps orally and then I'll show you the steps of the answer. First, what is done in this method is that in froth flotation, as you can see here, we take a flotation tank. This is called as flotation tank. In the flotation tank, what we do is we mix the ore particles, okay, ore particles, and those ore particles will have impurities stuck on it. And then what we'll do is after pouring the ore particles in this beaker, okay, and that beaker will contain of water and also oil, because oil is also a dirt particle, right? So then what we'll do is we'll pass air, okay, and as we pass air in this ore particles, what happens is this froth bubbles. That is, froth is called as bubbles. You see here na, froth will be formed here, that is bubbles will be formed here on the top, and the impurities will settle at the bottom and the ore you will get at the top. You are successfully able to separate ore and the impurities. Ore is settled at the top with the help of froth and impurities are settled at the bottom when air is passed. That is only your froth flotation process used for sulfide ores. For getting ores from sulfide, we use this method. Okay, now that we'll write in steps. These steps are there in your textbook. You can refer. Froth flotation method is a method which is used to separate the metal compound from unwanted rocky material by physical means. That is, physical means only, no? Passing air and separating the metal from the unwanted rocky material. Then second point, it is used for sulfide ores which have no wetting property. That is, initially the sulfide ores will not be wet, But what are we going to do? We are going to make the impurities wet, right? Because we are going to pass them in a flotation tank. The ores are passed in the flotation tank. So the sulfide ores are getting wet. The sulfide ores with the impurities are getting wet. That is the meaning of that sentence. So the ore with impurities, what will happen? It will be finely powdered and it will be kept in a water, taken in a flotation cell. And then what do? We blow air under pressure so that froth is obtained at the top. We see the bubbles obtained at the top when the air is blown. So this froth, this takes the ore particles to the surface, whereas impurities settle at the bottom. We see this. So thereby froth is separated and washed to get ore particles. That is, we remove the bubbles and we take the ores. Thereby ore we get successfully by using froth flotation method. Ninth question. Electron enters into 4s orbital but not 3d orbital after filling 3p orbital. Why? Guess and write. Here remember this diagram. 1s, 2s, 2p, 3s, 3p, 3d. We see in this diagram and then 4s. We see in this diagram. How is the diagram? First it enters into 1s, then it enters into 2s, then it enters into 2p, then it enters into 3s, then 3p to 4s2. We see that it enters 4s and then it will enter 3d. First it enters 4s and then it is entering 3d. We see this. So in this question it is asking that only, that why it enters into 4s and not into 3d. That I have to explain. This is my Moller's chart. So electron enters into 4s orbital but not 3d after filling 3p orbital because according to Aufbau principle, electron enters into lower energy orbital first. The orbital which has lower energy, that orbital electron will enter first. So here, why is it entering 4s first and not 3d? Because 4s is having low energy. Okay, and 3d will have lesser energy. Okay, so here see, the energy values are based on the formula N plus L. This is the formula which is there for Aufbau principle. Okay, what is Aufbau principle? Aufbau principle says us that first electron enters into lower energy orbital and then it will enter into higher energy orbital. So the formula is N plus L. So for 4s energy level, what is the formula we have? N plus L. Remember, when n is equals to 4, we have L is equals to 0. So n is 4 plus L is 0. 4 plus 0 is 4. So we got for 4s energy level, what is the value of n plus L? N plus L is 4 for 4s energy level. Now coming to 3D energy level, again formula is n plus L. Remember, for 3D, for n is equals to 3, we have L is equals to 2. So n is 3, L is 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. So we see that 3D orbital has energy value 5 and 4s orbital has energy value 4. So which is lower? 4s is lower, it is having 4 energy level, and 3d is more, it is having 5 energy level. So of course the electron will enter into 4s orbital, that is lower energy orbital first, and then it will enter into 3d orbital because 4 is less than 5. How are we getting this? N is equals to 4, L is equals to 0, and N is equals to 3, L is equals to 2. Remember from the formulas which you have in your textbook. I'll show that. See this, remember this table? From this table only we get. We are writing for 4s. See, for 4s, what is the value of L? The value of L is 0. So for N is equals to 4, what is L? 0. Similarly, 3D. For 3D, what is the value of L? L value is 2. Moving on to question number 10. Question number 10 states, draw the ray diagrams for the convex lens when object is placed beyond C2 and an object is placed between F2 and C2. You need to remember the rules for drawing ray diagrams. Remember that. We'll do that. The question is, we have to draw the ray diagram for the convex lens when the object is placed beyond the center of curvature on the principal axis. So this is your diagram which you should know. Here, remember how to draw this diagram. See, first you should draw a principal axis and you should draw a convex lens. This is the denotation of convex lens. 2 arrows, okay, pointing upwards. Then you have 2 focuses and 2 center of curvatures, okay, over here. This is F1, C1, F2, C2. So here it is telling that the object is kept beyond the center of curvature. Beyond the center of curvature means it is kept here because this is my center of curvature. So it should be far away from center of curvature. This is my object O. When an object is placed beyond center of curvature, I'll use the rule whenever a ray is passing through the principal axis, it passes through the focus. I'll use this rule. And then I'll also use this called as optic center, as we all know that whenever a ray passes through the optic center, it remains undeviated. So we see that our image is formed here at this particular point, that is between F1 and C1, right? So see here also the image is formed between F1 and C1. I have showed you object is placed between center of curvature and focal point. Between center of curvature and focal point means you can, this is my principal axis, this is my convex lens, okay? As usual, F2, C2, F1, C1. Whenever an object is kept between F1 and C1, a ray is parallel to principal axis, it passes to the focus. Don't forget to draw the arrows, okay? Next is, whenever a ray passes to optic center, it also passes through optic center, remains undeviated. So where is the image formed? The meeting point of these two rays is called as image. We see here that image is formed here, that is beyond C2. So how is the nature of the image? We get real, inverted and magnified. Inverted means it is below the principal axis. Magnified means it will be bigger when compared to the object. As you can see here, it is very bigger when we compare it to the object, and the image will form beyond C1. You should write all this: real, inverted and magnified. Real means it can be obtained on screen. Similarly, you also have to write the characteristics for object placed beyond center of curvature also. But here also we got the image is real, inverted, below the principal axis, diminished. Because if you see here, when compared to this object, it is the size of the image is very small. So it is diminished. Diminished means very small. And it is formed between F1 and C1. These points you should write whenever you draw any ray diagram. Remember this. It's very easy. It's there in your textbook. You can learn it. Only two rules we are using. One is passing through the principal axis, passes through focus. Another is ray passing through optic center, remains undeviated. Wherever it forms, that will be my image. Question 11. Write the characteristics of modern periodic table. For this, we need to understand what a modern periodic table is. This is your modern periodic table, which is also there in your textbook. So here it is asking us to write the characteristics of modern periodic table. Characteristics means features. Okay. So like how many rows are there, how many vertical columns are there, what are these called, all these characteristics possessed by this periodic table, modern periodic table, that we have to write. Okay. And more property we know about modern periodic table is that it is written based on atomic number. Modern periodic table. For example, hydrogen atomic number you can see here 1. Then helium atomic number 2, lithium atomic number 3, 4, 5. So based on that, it is arranged in horizontal rows based on atomic number. As atomic number increases, the elements also increases. Okay, so those properties all we will write now. No need to draw this periodic table in the exam, but just I have showed you so that you will get an idea what a modern periodic table is. So the long form of modern periodic table, it consists of, just now we saw, vertical columns, and those vertical columns are called as groups, and it consists of horizontal rows called as periods. Elements are arranged in increasing order of atomic numbers. Elements in the modern periodic table are arranged in 7 periods totally and 18 groups. See, this property is written as I have just now explained you. Elements are placed in periods based on number of shells in their atoms. How many shells are there in the atom? In that order, elements are placed. Some more points. In this periodic table, the position of an element is related to electronic configuration of its atom. The modern periodic table explains the similarities and variations in the properties of the elements in terms of electronic configuration and brings about clearly the trends in chemical properties across the long periods. Inert gases having completely filled electron shells have been placed at the end of each period. We know that the last column at the end of each period, that is your noble gases, right? That one needs telling us. Such a location of inert gases represents logical completion of each period. The greatest advantage of this periodic table is that this is divided into 4 blocks: S, P, D and F. See, these two are your S block elements. This is my P block elements, F block elements and D block elements. So S, P, D, F also they can be arranged. It provides a clear position of different types of elements like active metals, transition metals, non-metals, metalloids, inert gases, lanthanoids, and actinoids. That is, it gives a clear difference between all of them. Okay, like all these elements are present in the modern periodic table. And these all are metals till here, and we know non-metals are gases which are there here, and in between which the staircase which you see, those elements are nothing but metalloids or semi-metals. These are called as lanthanoids and actinoids. Okay, so all the elements are there in the modern periodic table, and clear difference is provided, like left side metals are there, right side non-metals are there. Okay, and then in between metalloids are there. That is the point. See this point? The lanthanoids and actinoids have been given a separate place at the bottom of the periodic table due to the analogous chemical behavior. Analogous chemical behavior means these lanthanoids and actinoids you see at the bottom of the periodic table, as I showed you just now. These lanthanoids and actinoids, okay, they have some weird properties. Because of that, they're placed in bottom of the periodic table, and this arrangement of the elements is easy to remember and reproduce. These are the characteristics of modern periodic table which we need to write. Next question is, suggest an activity to show corrosion of iron occurs in presence of water and air. It is a very important question, and also it is very easy. To show corrosion of iron occurs in presence of water and air. That is, we have to say that iron gets corroded when water and air are present inside it. That we have to show in this experiment. See, what are the materials required for this? We require 3 test tubes. We require 3 iron nails. Okay. In each of them means totally 9 iron nails you need. 3 in each. Then you need anhydrous calcium chloride, that is a chemical. You need 3 rubber corks, and also you need oil and water, and also boiled water. Now what are we going to do? See the procedure. Take 3 test tubes and place clean iron nails in each of them. We are going to take 3 test tubes and placing iron nails in each of them. We are going to label these test tubes as A, B, and C. Then we are going to pour some water in test tube A, and we are going to put the cork on it. Cork means it is used for closing the test tube. Then we are going to pour distilled water in test tube B, and on top of it we are going to add a layer of about 1 ml of oil, and then we are going to put the cork. In test tube 3 or C, we are going to put some anhydrous calcium chloride powder in test tube C, and then we are going to place a cork on it. And before that, already nails were present inside them. Okay, then we are going to leave these test tubes as it is for few days, and then we are going to observe what happens. So when we observe after a few days, we observe that iron nails rust in test tube A, but they do not rust in test tubes B and C. Rust means they will form a coating on it. Okay, in test tube A, only in test tube A, they remain corroded. What is the reason? So observation you should write. Aim, materials required, procedure. Now write observation. What will you write as observation? In the test tube A, the nails are exposed to both air and water. You see here, right? We have not put any layer on top of the iron nails, and also we have not put any powder on it. We have already put water inside the test tube, and also air was there inside the test tube. After air went inside the test tube and after water was there, then only we had closed the cork. So because air and water are present inside the test tube A, the iron nails get corroded inside it. As we can see, the brownish coating is formed in test tube A. Whereas in test tube B, this also comes under observation. All these points you should write in observation. In test tube B, the nails are exposed to only water, and the nails in test tube C are exposed to dry air. That is, only if they are exposed to water or only if they are exposed to air, then they will not get corroded. In order for them to get corroded, for iron nails, both air and water should be present. So my result will be corrosion of iron, which is commonly called as rusting, occurs in presence of water and air. This is my result. Okay, and for your answer you should also draw this figure and write the figure name as well. And if you want, you can also write this reaction. At anode we have 2Fe becomes 2Fe2 plus 4 electrons. If you want only, you can write. This is extra. Okay, and you can also write the reaction at cathode. The reaction at cathode is O2 plus 4H plus 4 electrons giving rise to 2H2O. Okay, and then if we add the overall reaction, we get 2Fe plus O2 giving rise to 4H plus giving 2Fe2 plus 2H2O. Okay, you can write this point. The ferrous ions Fe2 plus are further oxidized by atmospheric oxygen to ferric oxides Fe3 plus. And then you can say that this is nothing but rest is Fe2O3 into XH2. These are extra points which you can write if time permits. Okay, learn and keep. This is 13th question, which is there from the chapter Electricity of Physics. A house has 3 tube lights, 2 fans and a television. Each tube light draws 40 watts, the fan draws 80 watts and the television draws 60 watts. On the average, all the tube lights are kept on for 5 hours, 2 fans for 12 hours and television for 5 hours daily. Find the cost of electrical energy used in 30 days at the rate of rupees 3 per kilowatt. What do you have to find out? Cost of electrical energy used means you have to find out the amount in rupees. For how many days? For 30 days. And for how much rate? For 1 kilowatt hour, it's asking us rupees 3. Okay, so how much will be for total kilowatt hour? That much rupees we have to find out. Okay, observe whatever is given in question. There are 3 tube lights, 2 fans and television, and also they're telling how much power they are drawing and how many hours they are kept on. All these are there. So let us solve this question now. It's very easy. First of all, what is it given? It is given that there are 3 tube lights, 2 fans and a television. So first let us concentrate on tube light, first equipment. So power consumed by one tube light is given as 40 watts. But here it is said that there are 3 tube lights. So power consumed by 3 tube lights will be 3 into multiply the power consumed by one tube light, 40. So we know 3 4s are 12 and 1 0 we have. So 120 watts is the power consumed by 3 tube lights. But it also told us the time for which the 3 tube lights are kept on. They're kept on for 5 hours. So consumption of power by 3 tube lights will be 5 to 120. We know 12 5s are 60 and 1 0 we have, so we got 600 watts. Let this be equation 1. Because we have found out how much power is consumed by 3 tube lights for 5 hours. Okay, we got the answer for tube lights. Now let us find out the power consumed by one fan. First, it's given that power consumed by one fan is 80 watts. And it told us that there are 2 fans. So multiply this value of power 80 watts with 2. 8 2s are 16 and 1 0 we have, so 160 watts. Now it also told us in the question that the fans are kept on for 12 hours. So multiply this power 160 watts with time, that is 12. So 12 16s are, we know 192 and 1 0 we have, so 1920 watts. So we have found out for how many hours the 2 fans are on. So let this be equation 2. Now moving on to equation 3. That is television. Equipment 3. Power consumed by television is given as 60 watt and it's told us that the TV was kept on for 5 hours. So multiply this power 60 into 5 hours. 5 6 are 30 and 1 0 we have, so 300 watts. Now we found out by how much and how many hours the television was on. So we have all the powers with us. Okay, power consumed by 3 tube lights we have 600 watts, power consumed by 2 fans we have 1920 watts, and power consumed by one television we have 300 watts. So add all these 600 plus 1920 plus 300, 600, it is 600. 600 plus 1920 plus 300, 0, 2, 9 plus 3 is 12, 12 plus 6 is 18, 1 plus 1 is 2. We got 2820 watts, but in the question it gave in terms of kilowatts hour. We know that 1 kilowatt is 1000 watt. So since we found out in terms of watts, we know kilowatts is of more value. So shift the decimal places by 3 on left hand side because 1 kilowatt is 1000 watts. So we get 2.280 kilowatts. So whenever you want to convert watt to kilowatt, remember shift it by 3 decimal places. So therefore, the total power consumption in 30 days, it told us for finding out 30 days. What we have found out is not for days, we just found out for time. That is how many hours they were on. So for 30 days means multiply this value of power 2.820 kilowatts with 30, and also we have to multiply with, for 1 kilowatt it is rupees 3. So for 2.820 kilowatt it will be how much means multiply it with 3. So 2.820 into 30 days into 3 rupees. That is, if you multiply, you will get the answer as 253.8. First multiply 33s are, you will get 90. Multiply 2.82 into 90. You will get the answer as 253.8. So this is how you have to solve this question. It's very easy. The question is, the following table is about the concave mirror. Okay, whenever such type of questions are given, actually they will be very easy, but you have to focus a lot on solving these questions. So underline the important points here. The important point is, which mirror is this? It is a concave mirror. Remember how a concave mirror will be? This is my concave mirror. What is this? P. This is F and this is C. Pole, focal point of focus and center of curvature. Okay. So focal length of the mirror is given as 10 centimeter. You know what is focal length? Focal length means the distance between the focal point and the pole is called as focal length. So focal length is given as 10 centimeter. Till here you have the length is 10 centimeter. Now it told us that read the table and write the answers for the questions given below. Position of the object is given to us, position of the image is given to us, enlarged and diminished is given, inverted, erect, real, virtual. This table is also there in your textbook. Okay, but you need to study this and different questions are asked that you have to answer. So in this it is asking us, first question is, write the nature of the image formed when the object is placed at 15 centimeter. So here we are going to place the object at 15 centimeter, but here it didn't tell us anything about dimensions. But what hint it gave? It told us that the focal length is 10 centimeter, means still here it is 10 centimeter. If it is 15 centimeter means you have to go beyond F. That is, here the object is placed. Then only it will be 15, more than 10 means. Till F, till focal point F, I have the focal length is 10 centimeter. But since it is 15 centimeter means it will be beyond 10, that is this is 15. So where will the object be? The object will be between F and C, that is focal point and center of curvature. Okay, so between F and C, what is the nature of the image formed? Nature means, remember, whether it is enlarged or diminished, whether it is inverted or erect, whether it is real or virtual. That is the characteristics of the image are called as nature of the image. That only it is asking us, see in this question, what is the nature of the image formed when the object is placed at 15 centimeter? So 15 centimeter means it is formed between F and C. And from the table only you get to know that if it is between F and C, then the image is enlarged, inverted and real. So you should write, when the object is between F and C, the image is enlarged, inverted and real. And what you can do is you can draw this diagram also. So you'll get marks. Okay, and then you can write the nature of the image is enlarged, inverted and real when the object is placed between F and C, that is at 15 centimeter. Okay, next, second bit, what happens to the size of the image if the object is moving towards the mirror? Observe the question carefully. It is telling us, it is asking us, what is the size of the image if the object is moving towards the mirror? Means, again, this is my concave mirror, right? This is P, this is F and this is C. So as the object is moving towards the mirror, that is a question being asked. As the object is moving towards the mirror, first where is the object? C. First the object is beyond C. If we see here, beyond C. Then the object is on center of curvature. Then the object is between F and C. Then the object is at F. Then the object is between P and F. So we see that as the object is approaching, the mirror, this is my mirror, right? As the object is approaching the mirror, where is the object approaching the mirror? When it is between P and F. So between P and F we can say, or between mirror and F we can say, because P is on the mirror only. So when the object is between mirror and F, we can say that how is the size of the image? The size of the image is enlarged. So what will you write? When the object is moving towards the mirror, the size of the image becomes enlarged. Since the object, okay, from here it is coming here. So we see from the table that when it is between mirror and F, that is when it is very nearer to the mirror, how is the size of the image? Enlarged. Third bit, size of the object and size of the image are 4 centimeter and 6 centimeter respectively. It's asking us to find out magnification. See, for this you need to know the formula. Size of the object is indicated by h0, size of the image is indicated by hi. Object is given as 4 centimeter and height of the image is given as 6 centimeter. The formula to find out magnification is m is equals to, so m is equals to hi by h0. Here it is given that height of the image or size of the image, both are same. Size of the object is given as 4 centimeter, size of the image is given as 8 centimeter. Size of the image is how much? 6, and size of the object is 4. So divide 6 by 4. 4 ones are 4. 4 ones are 4. Put a point, bring down 0. 4 5s are 20. We get 1.5 centimeter if we divide 6 by 4. So what is the magnification formed when it is when the size of the object is 4 centimeter and size of the image is 6 centimeter? It is 1.5 centimeter. See, you have to write line wise everything because it is for 8 marks. Means how we should write? You should write given size of the object is equals to h naught is equals to 4 centimeter. Then you should write size of the image hi is equals to 6 centimeter. Then you should write to find magnification. Then write the formula m magnification m is equals to hi by h naught. Write everything. Size of the image by size of the object. Then write down hi by h naught. Okay, then substitute 6 by 4. Okay, then write down this much centimeter. Then last bit is, where do you keep the object to get image at infinity? See, where is the image at infinity? Observe position of image column. When the image is at infinity, where is the object? The object is on focal point. So you will write, when the image is at infinity, we keep the object on focal point. Okay, this completes your physics part A question paper. Hope it is easy to score 30 marks. Please prepare well. All the best. And if you have benefited from this video, then please like, share, and please subscribe this video and share this video with your friends. Thank you very much.